Hello and good evening. Welcome to a special edition of South Today from the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. It's the 200th anniversary of the modern railway. We're not just talking about a mode of transport here. The coming of the railways was huge and changed life as we know it. They didn't just change the landscape, but where we choose to live, how we spend our money, what we eat, and even how we measure time. Tonight, we'll look back at just how railways did that here in the south, what happened when communities lost them, and we look at what role they might have to play in the future. But first, here's a summary of the day's news with Sarah Farmer.
Rail passengers on the Isle of Wight say they're disappointed that the line will have to close for the second time in a year to allow for urgent engineering works. The Island line, which runs between Ryde and Shanklin, will be fully shut for more than 2 weeks from Saturday the 18th of October to allow for upgrades at Ryde. The Isle of Wight Rail Users Group says it's frustrating, especially as the line only reopened in May this year after an 8-month closure. Ryde Pierhead and Ryde Esplanade stations will remain out of action until November the 18th. Now, staying with rail, we can cross now to Tom Hepworth, who's at the Steam Heritage Railway at Havenstreet on the Isle of Wight for a special edition of South Today. Tom.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, welcome back. It has been 200 years since the opening of the world's first modern railway, the Stockton and Darlington. Now, that may have been up in the northeast, but as railways spread, the world changed forever. It's difficult to underestimate just how seismic this was. It was a revolution of speed and connection. Towns sprang up out of nowhere, our diets changed, and the world shrank. The pace of change must have been truly frightening. Now, the Isle of Wight was late to the party. It was the last county in England to get a railway in 1862. At its height, it had a rail network of 55 miles, linking most of the main towns and villages. Railways supercharged the first big boom in mass tourism, the seaside holiday. Just look at how busy Ryde Pierhead Station is in 1963, as thousands queued for trains to resorts after getting off the ferry. And Jana Gadgill's been looking at how the railways changed us forever.
Heading off on holiday from London to the south coast, a trip made possible by train.
The Great Western Railway invented the idea of going on holiday to the seaside in the southwest, which were lots of fishing villages that were providing local food. They weren't places to go and explore in that way.
Bournemouth initially missed out on mass tourism as there was no direct line from London.
So this is a picture of Bournemouth in 1861 as the rich people came to live in Bournemouth and to stay here.
The first train to this area came from 1847 when the train from Southampton to Dorchester was built. But that didn't come anywhere near Bournemouth. It went to Ringwood and to Wimborne. And so people would have to get off in the middle of the New Forest and come the last 10 miles by coach and horses. Well, obviously, not many people can afford to do that.
But hoteliers and politicians pushed, and in 1888 the direct line was built, London to Bournemouth, in just 2 hours.
There was a big boom in the different people that came, and it became much more of a sort of summer resort. But it really drives that boom, which then continues into the 20th century.
Main lines, branch lines, loop lines, network upon network.
The railway also changed the landscape. Cuttings, viaducts and new urban centres like Eastleigh and Swindon.
So you put a line in two places, but then along that line it allows towns to grow, new markets to develop that wouldn't have been there before. So actually a lot of the large medieval towns, if they don't get an early train station, don't develop and are left out. And there are some tiny places, Swindon being a great example, that really take off.
Trains also changed our perception of time. This sundial in an old bank building in Andover was made in 1846 and shows that Andover time is 6 minutes behind London time. 10 years later, when the railways arrived here, time was standardised and Andover time and London time became the same.
Everybody's midday is determined by the highest point of the sun, noon, which is slightly different across the country. When you're travelling at hundreds of miles an hour, you have to have a train timetable that tells you when the train is going to arrive.
So as we moved faster, we also moved further, a growing network of railway lines that changed the way we live. And Jana Gadgill BBC South Today.
Now, these carriages are nearly 140 years old, and this is first class, and I have to say, it's rather plush. But with me now is Dr. Helen Paul, an economic historian from the University of Southampton. Train travel wasn't just for the rich, though, was it? Did it promote social mobility?
Well, yes, it did. It's not just geographical mobility, it's also the boom in the economy that the railway brings about. Brings a lot of opportunities for lots of people, lower priced goods, being able to live in suburbia and commute into work, things like that, and also share ownership in the railway companies themselves.
Aside from that, how did it change people's lives?
Well, for example, you could get your London daily newspaper. There were special newspaper carriages because obviously a lot of newspapers are really heavy. You want to move them quickly. And then things like perishable food, say watercress, that's why we have the watercress line.
And the strawberry line in the hedge end as well. Did it improve our health?
Yes, it did, and sometimes in very unexpected ways. We have the Railway for the Dead, which was the London Necropolis Railway Company. It had its own station right next to Waterloo, and it specialised in taking funeral parties out to the new Brookwood Cemetery to alleviate overcrowding in the London cemeteries, which had been a public health hazard.
So the railways were as important in life as they were in death. Thank you very much indeed, Helen. Well, railways played a vital role for many rural communities, like this one in Havenstreet. But by the 1960s, rural lines were losing money hand over fist. The infamous Beeching report led to the closure of thousands of miles of railway lines. Towns and villages which lost their trains were promised more local buses. But 60 years on and public transport, well, it's now considerably worse for many villages than it was when they were served by the railway. Bryony Leyland reports now from Shillingstone in Dorset.
Laying track the old-fashioned way. Inch by inch, these volunteers are rebuilding a section of railway at Shillingstone that was ripped up in the 1960s.
We're doing this for about 10 years now.
How much of a workout is it for you, Bill?
Brilliant, it really is. I mean, people go to the gym, but this is much better than going to the gym.
The aim is to run steam train rides, but there's no hope of fully restoring the rail connections this Dorset village once boasted. Shillingstone was on the Somerset and Dorset line, the S&D, connecting Bath with Bournemouth. The famous Pines Express transported holidaymakers, and other trains carried agricultural goods and provided local passenger services.
So this is bringing back some memories for you here, Bob?
It certainly is.
Porter and signalman Bob Downs came to work at Shillingstone aged 19 in 1962.
What's it like being back in the signal box after all these years?
It's actually terrific. I'd love to be in here all day with trains going by. There was always a busyness about the station, no matter where you went.
Bob says he was devastated when Shillingstone station closed. He thinks cutting so many lines was a big mistake.
See, this is quite a big village, Shillingstone. It's doubled in size since the railway shut. Blandford is the same. I mean, now we could really do with our railways back in situ.
Oh, sad, forgotten S&D.
There were voices who called for railways to be saved, like the poet Sir John Betjeman.
Railways are bound to be used again, when we all of us know that road traffic is becoming increasingly hellish on this overcrowded island. I think it's more than likely that we'll deeply regret the branch lines we've torn up and the lines that we've let to go to rot.
Improved bus services were promised to replace branch lines, but many argue those promises weren't fully kept. Every Wednesday, John Colbert, who volunteers at Shillingstone, travels from his home in Poole, picking up this connecting bus in Blandford.
Over here is where the railway line went.
John would like to come out on Saturdays too, but there's a hitch.
This bus doesn't run at weekends, only Mondays to Fridays. Thank you, sir. I can get to Blandford, but I can't get any further.
For most people in Shillingstone, cars are now the way to get from A to B. But down at the old station, they treasure the memory of a time when the railway played a bigger part in keeping the countryside connected. Bryony Leyland, BBC South Today, Shillingstone.
Well, all the hard work by the volunteers at Shillingstone is beginning to bear fruit. You see, tests last week saw the first steam engine run on that bit of line since 1966, though you won't be able to travel on it for some time yet, though. Well, this railway cut was closed at the very same year, but it's been operating as a preserved heritage line for more than 5 decades. Well, earlier I asked the Chief Executive, Mark Morgan-Hughes, what challenges they face here.
Climate change is a big one. We all know it's been much drier this year, has been for a number of years. Like all steam railways, we have a much increased risk of setting fire to the countryside bluntly, so we've had to do a lot of work, put a lot of time and investment into trying to mitigate against that. And then actually coal itself. Coal comes halfway around the world these days. It used to come from Wales. Welsh steam coal burnt cleaner, better. We now pay a lot more money for coal. It's of an inferior quality.
What does the Isle of Wight Steam Railway bring to the island economy?
So we're one of the largest visitor attractions on the island. Over 100,000 people come here each year. That's what people tend to think. Turnover £3 million a year. That all goes into the economy of the island. But actually, we're a really big family of volunteers alongside our staff. So 500 volunteers actually come and work on the railway during the course of the year.
What about the future? Where do you see the railway going from here?
Everyone loves a steam engine, don't they? So, we're going to be here, we're going to be running steam engines in the future. But we do have to be really conscious that, we've got younger generations, how do we engage them? But we're also looking at other things that we can do to add to the railway. We've just bought the station down the line at Ashy, which is a fabulous addition to the railway. So we've got lots more things we can do, and even well beyond this generation, there'll be plenty more things that future generations can bring to the railway, I'm sure.
So what about the future? Well, the way we're using trains is changing. South Western Railway has already been renationalised. Still waiting for the legislation to create Great British Railways. Well, back in the 1950s and 60s, British Railways cut back on goods trains like the one you see approaching the platform, as road haulage took off, with millions of pounds being spent building motorways and new roads. But as those new roads and motorways got more congested, then the calls to bring more freight back onto the railway lines got louder. Campbell has been looking to the future.
Born out of the infamous beaching reforms, Freightliner has weathered 60 years of change on Britain's railways. Now, as passenger services running past its Southampton site return to public ownership, eventually under the control of Great British Railways, like most freight operators, it must create a path through a newly renationalised industry.
It's really important that as the legislation to create Great British Railways goes through, that actually the rights of private companies, particularly freight companies, are enshrined within that. And we've got to make sure that GBR don't just see freight as something they do after they run a passenger train. It's integral to the foundation of the railway, always has been, and it really should be.
And with the right incentives, it can do more. Southampton Port offers cash bonuses to companies whose containers leave here by rail rather than road.
Back in 2023, around 20% of all the containers that came through Southampton went by rail. Today, we're up to almost 30% of the containers going by rail.
September's the busiest month for moving these boxes. Inside, all the stuff the shops want on their shelves, ready for Christmas. This Doncaster-bound freight is a new service, taking containers off the South's roads. Heading north, this is commuter land. But for all its familiarity, post-COVID, there's change here too.
People are no longer commuting 5 days a week every week. The classic weekly, monthly, annual season tickets are frankly no longer fit for purpose. But on the cost side, people are typically taking Monday or Friday off, so the railway still needs all those expensive extra trains for carrying people on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday.
A short hop from the kitchen where Mark blogs to his followers is this. HS2 and East-West Rail cross here in Buckinghamshire. But is this really back to the future? East West reopens the closed Oxford to Cambridge Varsity line. HS2 recreates capacity lost with the closure of the Great Central, whose trains used to run through here.
The road transport was easier, it took over. I think we're seeing the opposite again now. So everyone now is looking at ways of increasing rail connectivity to take all the excess transport back off the roads.
Police will be informed. That's fine, the police come every day, we don't have a problem with the police.
The lines have faced opposition every inch of the way. Now almost complete, at least the Oxford to Cambridge line offers visible benefits.
Railway infrastructure is really complex to deliver, but the benefits that it provides last for generations. And that is really at the heart of East West Rail, to make sure that the communities along the route have those benefits far into the future.
The railway has always been a disruptor, and whether it's construction or politics, the road ahead remains a bumpy one. Joe Campbell, BBC South Today.
Well, Dr. Helen Paul is with me again. Helen, Joe mentioned in his report that the railway's always been a disruptor. Are there similarities between the coming of the railway age and the digital age now?
Oh, absolutely. Any big technology will bring a lot of optimism, but also a lot of pessimism. People get very anxious about it, but they also see new opportunities, and then they start to worry about how to regulate it, how much control the government should have. So that's very, very similar.
There's also a real fear of crime brought by the railways, wasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And people can move around. These big train stations are absolutely ideal for pickpockets and people like that.
Is it fair to say railways made us who we are now, even some of maybe their unintended consequences?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously the economic changes, the Industrial Revolution is huge, but there are things people may not have realised, like the football leagues. You have teams moving around the country. They all need the same set of rules, and then they get sports journalists, and then of course the fans who want to go to the away matches. So it completely changes football, for example.
We wouldn't have an FA Cup or the leagues without railways. Helen, thank you very much indeed. Now, without engineers, though, railways just wouldn't exist, would they? While famous names like Isambard, Kimden Brunel and George Stephenson are known the world over, there was one engineer whose story is quite interesting. He was the chief mechanical engineer of the Southern Railway, Oliver Bulleid. He was a genius, but a genius who sometimes got things wrong. Oliver Bulleid was renowned for his magnificent, speedy Pacific locomotives, like this one at the Swanage Railway in Dorset. But he was an innovator from an early age. As a young man, Oliver Bulleid redesigned this, the humble coat hanger. He gave a lot of thought to how people got undressed on sleeper trains. Think about it. You'll take your jacket off first and hang it up. But when it comes to hanging your trousers up, you need to take your jacket off again to do that. So he redesigned the bar at the bottom and moved it above here and had it coming out a little bit, so you didn't have to take your jacket off twice. Didn't catch on though. By the Second World War, that drive for efficiency served Oliver Bulleid and the war effort well. The South was on the front line and the Southern Railway desperately needed cheap, rugged, powerful and reliable steam engines to haul freight with vital supplies and munitions. The Q1, unconventional, some might say ugly, was stripped back to save on materials, but lightweight and powerful, just what was needed. He also invented Britain's only double-decker train. Extra capacity without the extra expense of making station platforms longer.
The floor of the upper deck is 4 feet higher than the usual floor, though its roof is no higher from the rails than the old coach. Hence, no alterations to tunnels and bridges are necessary. Curved windows and strip lighting add new notes of comfort to upstairs travel.
Enthusiasts are restoring a 4DD, which was built in Eastleigh and Lancing.
It was always exciting to see if the double-decker came into the station, and there was always a rush to get upstairs and sit on the drop-down seats.
I guess when these trains were very busy, they were quite smelly because people's feet were very near people's heads.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the complaints that they made at the time. Yeah, there's no ventilation really as such. They were hot, smelly and a bit dirty, to be honest.
The double-deckers remained in service for nearly 2 more decades, much longer than his later loco designs, the Leader and a turf-burning engine that he built for Irish Railways. But of all his innovations, this is my favourite.
Britain's nationalised railways open the first travelling taverns. With oak beams, settees and that oldie-worldy atmosphere, the tired businessman can in future pretend he'd already in the country pub. An extra attraction, no licensing hours.
And why stop there? You could have a pub quiz, a roaring fire, a jukebox or even a meat raffle. But that may have been a step too far, even for a maverick like Oliver Bulleid. Now, signalmen with long gaps in between trains might indulge in a bit of gardening, maybe a window box with some tomatoes. But station masters in rural stations would take great pride in their station gardens. That's where Alexis Green is now.